So we are starting the class today. The beginning of the class we will discuss about the static force analysis. The last three classes we have discussed about the static force analysis of mechanism. We have discussed the examples of a slider crank mechanism as well as a 4-bar mechanism. Now we will summarize those aspects. So, static force analysis of mechanisms. So, we are going to see the summary of it. So, in static force analysis of mechanisms, first we make assumption. When we are doing that analysis, we have made assumptions. What are the assumptions? First assumption is that the weight of the linkages are negligible compared to the forces and the reactions. In the mechanism we discussed, we have drawn that and we have not taken the weight of the linkages. Of course, in real world, each link has a weight, so we have not considered those weights. To simplify it, what we have made an assumption that the linkages, the weight of the linkages are negligible compared to the forces involved. So, we neglect that. The second assumption we do is the joints, the friction. Joints don't have friction. So, each linkage, one linkage and other linkages are connected by joint. Specifically, say a revolute joint. We have said that the revolute joint cannot transmit torque, only forces can be transmitted. That is valid only if there is no friction. If there is a friction between the two revolute joints, in a revolute joint, the torque will be transmitted, the friction torque will be transmitted. So, to simplify our analysis, we also assume that the joints are frictionless. So, these are the assumptions that we have done as per the static force analysis is concerned. Now, we will write down the steps involved. So, this is to summarize. So, what are the steps? So, first step, when you are trying to do the static force analysis, first step is draw the position of the mechanism and indicate the external forces and the torque. The forces and torques, you just draw the position of the mechanism, how the links are there in that position, and show the external forces and torques acting on it. So, that is the first step. Then the second step is to draw the free body diagram. Draw the free body diagram of each moving links. That is, we don't draw the free body diagram of a ground. That is not useful. So, free body diagram of links which are capable of moving, that you draw. So, that is the next step. Then the third step is represent the forces. Represent the forces on the free body diagram. With conventions. Following suitable convention, you represent the forces on the free body diagram. Okay? So, let us see these steps. What are the representation conventions that you have to follow? Is, here the notation force F23. If I say F23, it is a force applied by body, or in this case a link 2 on body 3. We say F32 is the force applied by body 3 on 2. So, we have to follow these conventions for convenience and consistency. So, the reverse, you should not put the reverse. F41 means force applied by body 4 on linkage 1. So, that we have to consistently follow. And then for representing the forces graphically, we use a wavy sign when both magnitude and the directions are unknown. Both magnitude and directions are unknown, you just put a wavy sign. You draw a line like this when direction is known but magnitude is not known. Okay, so we follow this these type of conventions to represent it properly. Now we represent like this when both magnitude and the directions are known. So when you draw the free body diagram, when you begin with that, if both are unknown, you put it like this. Then when you come to know the direction, you put it like this. Then if both are known, you can change that the force like this, so that you are consistently know these things are known. Okay? But the other case where magnitude is known, direction is not known. So you can say like this, where magnitude is known, direction is not known. So this is not given in the book, but we can follow this notation for this. So these are the conventions that we use. Now the next step, what we do is we have represented we have drawn the free body diagram, we represented the force. Then what we do is try to find out those forces. So step number 4 is first check whether this is solvable. Okay? Check whether the problem is statically determinate. Because if it is a unsolvable problem, statically indeterminate problem, there is no use of proceeding or keeping it, with you. So whether it is statically determinate, how will you do that? In planar problem, in planar problems, that is what we are discussing, 3 unknowns. Maximum of 3 unknowns are solvable. That is, only 3 unknowns can be found out. Because only we have 3 equations, only 3 unknowns can be found out. That could be either 2 magnitude and 1 direction, or 2 directions and 1 magnitude. Anything that you can solve. If not, that is, you have more than 3 unknowns, then if it is not, try to combine two linkages and solve. So we did it, when there is more unknowns, we can combine 2 linkages together, consider them as a single body. If a number of unknowns are now can be reduced, you can do that. So this is the step number 4. So the 5th one is use the engineering mechanics principles. You know that whether it is solvable or not. Say when it is solvable, use the engineering mechanics principles to solve. To solve the free body diagram, the unknowns in the free body diagram. So you can use like law of equilibrium, you can use theorem of 3 forces, you can use the technique of resolution of a force into a force and a torque. So you can use these principles. Taking a force, by if you shift it parallelly to the other point, then it will result in a force at a couple, or the vice versa. So you can use all this thing so that you can find out the unknowns in that problem. Okay, so these are the steps of for solving the static forces in a linkage or in a mechanism. Okay, so you have any doubt? So static force analysis is a specific case where a mechanism is used for holding something, whereas most of the mechanisms are used for transfer of the power. So they will be moving, the linkages will not be static, they will be moving. So in that case we will be doing an analysis called dynamic force analysis. That means your mechanisms will be, or the part of the mechanisms will be accelerating. Okay, so when a body is accelerating, then you involve a force called inertia force. So the forces, by definition, or the statement by Norton, forces due to acceleration are called inertia forces or dynamic forces. So forces due to acceleration are called inertia force or dynamic force. So here forces, inertia forces are dynamic forces. Okay, you take something which is accelerating. But before going to that, this term inertia. So what is inertia? So if we are asked a question, what is inertia? What you will say? It is a property of the body to maintain its status, either at rest or continue moving in a straight line with a constant velocity. So when you are trying to change its position of rest or its position of moving in a straight line with a constant velocity, you try to change it, it will resist. That resistance is called inertia. So how do you quantify inertia? Because in your, either in science or engineering, you have to fix a number to it. No knowledge is complete without fixing a number to it. Statement by Kelvin. Okay? Without fixing a number to it. That is, unless you quantify it, the knowledge is not complete. By Kelvin. So inertia is okay. Descriptively, it is a resistance offered to change its position from the rest, or it's a resistance offered for acceleration. But how do you quantify it? What is the measure? If I have a body like this, whether it has an inertia, yes, everybody is having an inertia. So what is the measure of inertia? How much? What is the quantification of inertia? That is, for example, I have the ball like this. What is the inertia of this? Suppose I take a ball made of, this is made of plastics. Suppose I have a ball made of steel. So, do you think that their inertia is same? You have the chair. So, this chair has an inertia. So, do you think that inertia, all of them will resist the acceleration? Do you think that the resistance level will be the same? No, it will not be same, right? So how do you quantify that inertia? So quantification of inertia, that is resistant to linear acceleration, is called mass. So you know that an object has more mass, then it has more inertia. Okay, 1 kg mass and 2 kg mass, if you take the 2 kg mass has twice the inertia of the compared to the 1 kg mass. So that is the quantification. For linear acceleration, the inertia is quantified by its mass. For rotational acceleration, say something is not moving linearly, but it is rotating about an axis. So if you take two discs, one disc is tiny, other disc is really large disc. Both of them are capable of rotating about its center. Then given the torque, how do you quantify that which is going to have a more resistance to angular acceleration? So you have the angular acceleration. What is the quantification? How do you quantify that this has more resistance compared to this? What is the property? Yeah, it is very simple. It is a moment of inertia. Okay? The quantification of inertia is when it is subjected to linear acceleration. The resistance offered to linear acceleration is mass. So given by unit kg. But when something is rotating, the acceleration resistance offered by the body for angular acceleration is called moment of inertia. The unit is kg meter square. But compared to these two, there is a distinct difference between the two. One is that mass is a unique property. So the mass is invariant, it is not going to change. If I change the orientation, it will not change. If I take it to space, it will not change. If I put it on moon, it will not change. It's an invariant. Whereas the moment of inertia is not a unique value for an object, because if I take the same disk, if the center, rotation center, I change it here to this, it will change. So moment of inertia object is not an absolute value or unique value. It depends on axis of rotation. So you cannot say that simply. I can say that this ball has a mass of about 200 grams. I cannot say that this moment of inertia of this ball is 200 gram centimeter square or gram millimeter square. That is an incomplete statement. I have to say that about what axis? Okay, about an axis passing through the center of gravity, or axis passing outside, or the axis is displayed somewhere else, we do not know. So that also you have to specify. Okay, these are all some things are fundamental, which is just a reviewing of them. Now, something is rotating, how to analyze that? Okay, some object is accelerating, how to analyze? There are, say for example, I'll take this ball and I am trying to rotate this like this, okay? So it is rotating. This kind of a thing is called a conical pendulum, because it is a pendulum sweeps a cone. It is a conical pendulum. So if you want to analyze this conical pendulum, how do you do that? Okay, so our concentration is about that ball. Okay, I'll do it. our ball is here, this is the point, this is your card. If you try to draw the free body diagram of this ball, what are the forces which will be acting on it? Of course, because it is under gravity, weight will be acting on this, W. And the another force which is, what is the other constraint it has? The only constraint is this rope. So that will be offering a force T. Okay, only these two forces are acting on it. So this two forces are acting. So now what we can say is we can resolve this tension force into two components. So we can say, after resolving this into two components, so I can say this is the tension vertical component, this is the tension horizontal component. Now you can see that if the ball has to maintain some horizontal position because it is rotating, so that to maintain that horizontal position, TV should be equal to W. So this will always be in equilibrium. Okay, so the TV is a vertical force, vertical component of this tension. W is this. This will always be existing. Otherwise, this cannot be maintaining the horizontal position. Using the law of superposition, I can remove these two because these two forces are in equilibrium all the time, or here at this moment I can remove it. Now you see that this ball is subjected to a force. So if I draw this, the top view of this, it is going to be following a circular path. So this is your ball. So this TH, this is the top view. So TH will be acting towards the center. So this force is an active force that is responsible for giving the necessary centripetal, this is called centripetal force. This force is necessary to give the acceleration, necessary acceleration, because this is accelerating its direction. If you take the velocity vector of this velocity vector is not changing in terms of magnitude, but the direction is continuing to change. So it is subjected to acceleration. That acceleration is towards the center. You need a force to impart that acceleration. That force is given by TH. Okay, you can do like this. But in every problem, can you do like this? Is there any simple way? See, there you have to go back and see. In engineering mechanics, we have two parts, statics and dynamics. Statics and dynamics. The statics involves, equilibrium of forces under the action of equilibrium of body under the action of forces. So whether it is a planar forces or it is a parallel forces, couple, equilibrium under the action of couple, or forces acting in space. So all this theory has been developed under statics. Dynamics was developed much later. So the time period in the development of dynamics to statics, statics to dynamics, dynamics developed much later. The time lapse between the two is approximately 2000 years. Because Archimedes period itself, the statics and the principal equilibrium, all this has come, but only much later Galileo is a person to meddle with this dynamics. motion of the bodies, whether motion involves acceleration like that. The reason, primary reason for such a delay is very simple. People did not have the time measuring device, the watch. Today we are equipped with cell phones which has a stopwatch which can read about 0.1 second. But the entire humanity did not have the measuring device, accurate measuring device, so that they can read these, they can, with respect to time, can measure the displacements. So only Galileo has made a tricky method of slowing down that motion, vertical motion. He slowed down that vertical motion by using an inclined plane. If a body is kept on the inclined plane, this will move. So being a musician, he knows the notes, the timing sense. So he imparted some musical wires of different distances. He increased the distances. So when the ball rolled over it, it produces a tone. So equal tone for different the displacement. So he could prove that under the action of forces the body can accelerate. So the time measuring device was absent, so it took 2000 years to do this. But statics is well developed. So dynamics is newly developed. How to develop those laws and the method of solving the problems in dynamics? Can we use the principles of statics in dynamics by some way? So there, a gentleman called D'Alembert introduced a principle using which the dynamics problem can be solved using static principles of statics. So what is his principle is that he has written like this: F is equal to ma. It is a non-equilibrium condition. You write like this: F minus ma equal to 0. That is in equilibrium condition. Looks simple and absurd, but it is not like that. See, this particular force, m into a is magnitude of force only. This force was introduced for an analytical purpose, for solving the problems. So this is a fictitious force. He introduced an imaginary force into the system, dynamic system, so that the problem, the whole body can be brought into an equilibrium. So to distinguish a static equilibrium and to this new condition, this is called a dynamic equilibrium. So he introduced a fictitious force. What is that fictitious force? That force will have a magnitude of m into a. That means it will have the same magnitude as F, net resultant force. It will have an opposite acceleration, opposite to the direction of acceleration. So in this case, I have a force like this, which is the action force. The acceleration is towards the center. I introduce that fictitious force, which is opposite to the direction of acceleration, but will have the magnitude of the same net force acting on it. So this force is the fictitious force that is called inertia force or inertial force. D'Alembert suggested to introduce in the dynamics problem a fictitious force, an imaginary force like this. When I introduce such an imaginary force, now you know that what is the thing? You see that the system is in equilibrium. If this has to be in equilibrium, what is the condition? You can bring in a law of equilibrium of statics, which says that two forces are to be in equilibrium. They are to be equal in magnitude, opposite in direction, collinear in action. So you can solve those problems. So dynamics problems can be solved with the principles of statics by introducing a fictitious force called the inertial force, which many of you know that while preparing for your JEE as pseudo force. Because in physics, I think when I go through your papers, some of you write it as the centrifugal force as the pseudo force. Pseudo force is, don't use the pseudo force anymore. It is an imaginary force introduced. It is an inertial force. Okay? So that is the inertial. By introducing this inertial force, see, when you look at the ball alone, only action force is this centripetal force. But for analysis purpose, you introduce this inertial force. Okay? When you introduce this inertial force, then the problems can be solved. This is called the D'Alembert principle. So, D'Alembert also, this, if you take it for a particle, force F minus ma equal to 0, because mass is concentrated. For a body, for a rigid body, the mass is not concentrated. Each particle will have its own mass, because if you take a body, you can think of number of particles, system of particles over here. Each particle has its own mass. Each particle will produce an inertial force. What you have to look at is the sum of the inertial force you have to take. And where it will act, we do not know. Right? So, in that case, force F is externally applied, that is not going to change. But the next one will be the summation of M into A, or you can say MIAI. That is, if you take a particle here, you have to take that inertial force of that particle. So you have to sum the inertial forces of all the particles together to find out the net inertial force. So this must be equal to 0. But what is common here is, when it is subjected to a translation, all the rigid bodies, in case of rigid bodies, all of them will be subjected to same acceleration. So AI is constant, so sum of Mi equal to 0. So this particular thing is proportional to the mass. Okay? So you take a rigid body, it has number of particles. So when it is subjected to an acceleration, you will have say an inertial force like this. You have an inertial force like this. All of them will be parallel. Is it not? Because the acceleration direction is, say, in one direction, all of them will be subjected to same acceleration. That means the directions are same. All these things will be parallel forces. So it is like your gravity on a body. If you take a body, each particle is subjected to gravitational pull. If you think of a gravitational pull of all the bodies, they all will be parallel to each other. So when you have so many parallel forces together, you can find out a center about which a net force will be acting. Without going to the detail, I can say that that center is your center of gravity. So where the inertial force is, in case of a point, I have no confusion. I can put the inertial force opposite to the acceleration. If there is a rigid body subjected to an acceleration, then the inertial force has to be represented opposite to the acceleration but passing through the center of gravity. Because inertial force acts on every particle, the sum of that is to be taken. So that is equivalent to your gravitational force, that is all of them will be parallel. So it is a system of distributed parallel forces. So I can say that it will pass through effectively through a point that is called the center of gravity. So when you are handling a rigid body like this, you can say that it will be point of application of that inertial force through the CG. So it can be solved like this. But okay, let me take a pause. You have any doubt about this? Why should I worry about something fictitious? What is imaginary? Only for a solving purpose I am introducing. How that is going to affect me in reality? Now you look at, forget about this ball. You take the string which is applying. You look at the string that is applying this force. Only the string is applying the necessary force, right? So how that string, the string is under tension. What is it? Is the string is applying this force like this. It is experiencing a reaction. So that reaction is keeping it under tension. So a particle which is subjected to a centripetal acceleration, the force is applied by this rope. It experiences a reaction. It gives action force of the centripetal force, but it experiences a reaction force. That reaction force happens to be equal in magnitude but opposite in direction. It is same as this inertial force. So I am pushing something to accelerate. As a reaction, whatever I receive, I can say that it is the inertial force. The reactions what I feel is the inertial force. But when you look at that object, it is not going to experience an inertial force, but the one which is causing that acceleration will experience the inertial force. Okay? So as a reaction, always we will feel the force. And one more thing, like if you take this swing which is conical pendulum which is rotating like this, if you want to bring this into an equilibrium position, even without rotating, when it is in rotating, it is in this position, otherwise it will be vertical. When it is working as a conical pendulum, it will be like this, but I want to bring it in this position without rotation. That is possible if I apply an external force, isn't it? I am applying an external force equivalent to this inertial force, then I will be able to freeze. I will be able to bring this object without motion, otherwise it is achievable only by motion. Okay, this force I should offer to bring it in this position is equivalent to the inertial force. So we will be experiencing the inertial force as the reaction. Otherwise, the string cannot be in the tension. Only if I apply this, only the tension means it is in the forces are acted on it in the opposite direction. It is not towards this. Otherwise, it will be a compressive force. Okay. So this is the inertial force. In linkages, you know the linkages like coupler or crank or rocker, whatever it is. If you take a particle in it, it will be subjected to a kind of an acceleration. So each acceleration that will cause a inertial force. You have to take the sum of this and find out what is the net inertial force that will be experienced by the as a reaction. Okay, so that will be definitely, if you don't check it properly, that will be very high level, it may even break. Okay, so we will continue our discussion. So for finding out the inertia forces, we need to know what is the acceleration, and that too we need to know what is the acceleration of the center of gravity of the linkage. Okay, so we know how to draw the acceleration diagram of the linkage, but we need one more step in that. We should know how to find out the acceleration of a center of gravity of each linkage. So only then we will be able to draw or impose the inertial force on that. Okay, we will continue this in next class.